it still frustrates me that what I did in my placement year, we're talking like 1993 here, right? This is 31 years ago. What I did then, we are still producing now. And I know everyone talks about, now we have C-Disc. Okay, before then every pharma had their own standards. So the C-Disc is just to program, it's just another standard. But actually, we're still producing the same stuff now in the same way that we did then. And it's just depressing. I think, it's good that C-Disc is moving to like results database and things like this. I think that would really help to drive things forward.
I'm so excited to have Shafi on the episode today. Shafi has close to 3 decades experience as a statistical programmer. Much of those has been starting and running his own consultancy. What I really like about Shafi is that he has a lot of frustrations about things that should improve in the industry. But unlike a lot of people that I've met, he has an optimism that I so hope is infectious. I so hope comes across over to you, comes across over to any decision maker, any programmer out there. Shafi also spoke at our last Verizion community event here in London. His talk is on YouTube. So if you do want to learn more about the stuff that he's doing with his company, Shafi Consultancy, check out that talk. But in any case, I hope you enjoy this episode. Check it out. Shafi, it's so good to have you on the podcast. I'd love to start by asking you, how did Shafi Consultancy came about?
It's actually by accident. I'm kind of, I've been a programmer all my life and I like to help people. So it started off with like friends and relatives where they wanted to change from whatever they're doing, engineering and like other stuff, to programming. And so I used to just spend time with them. Like after work, they'd come to my house or I'd meet up with them in a bar and teach them how to program in SAS. And then afterwards, once they were reasonably good, then I'd speak to one of my clients and say look, you're struggling to get programmers. Do you want to have a look? See what you think? And you don't have to pay them initially. Let's just start and see what you think. And then they started and then they were really happy after a month. They're like, yep, we'll sign them up and so on. So initially they took a few and then they said, actually, well, can you sign them up? And then we'll just take more, from your side. And that's kind of how it started. So it was just like helping friends and relatives just to get into programming. And then when I was in Bangladesh, then I saw that everyone's kind of, they finish their degree and then they either go abroad or they become like lecturers or teachers. So I thought actually, well, there's more to life than if you've got a maths degree or stats degree than just becoming a lecturer or going abroad. So we started a company there and then it was just like 4 or 5 people. And then, for the first year, we just spent the year training them and so on and do all stuff. And then since then, they've been kind of taking care of it themselves. So that's been good. So that's kind of just how we started, just purely by chance.
And I mean, you're being very humble about it, but this is not something that happened last year. This is 15 years that you've been running Shafi Consultancy. How would you describe the different periods of the company?
We've started initially it was just me, and that started in 2001. So it's like 23 years.
Wow.
And then after about a couple of years there, then I started to help, people to get into this and so on. So that's kind of how it started, just grew from there. The first year, it was really just me training people. And it was really hard work because, I was doing a contracting full-time role. And then in the evenings, like I say, it's like, so this was kind of what I enjoyed doing. So programming is kind of like my hobby. So it wasn't like, and helping people is quite good. Especially when people are eager to learn, they're always the best to teach because, you show them some stuff and then they go away. And then during the day when I'm working, then they're practicing. And then they come back in the evening, the next day, and they've done stuff. It's not like staff and so on who are slacking and things like this. So this was actually really quite nice. I really enjoyed that phase.
And you know what I really like about if I can be very direct, Shafi, is that I've met a lot of consultants especially in statistical programming. A lot of people that want to get into have their own consultancies, but I always get the sense that it's a very sort of zero-sum game where people are very scared of either sharing the secret sauce, frankly not willing to help. And I feel like with you just sort of started helping people. That just happened to turn into something that you've been doing with a lot of love for a long time. And I don't think you really describe your passion as necessarily doing the consultancy, but rather helping people grow. And I think that's sort of, I think what's, for my perspective, again, if I can be so direct, one of the key distinctive features from you and why you've been so successful.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, for me, I've always been like, I like to, it doesn't matter what I know. I think we're all doing the same thing. So I like to share everything. Also, when I'm a consultant, like I'm working in, it's kind of whatever I learn or whatever I create, I share with everyone so they can all benefit from it. And I think as a consultant, you should have added value. Right, so that's part of the fun. You share it, then they take over, and then you can then do other things. Sometimes I see people getting stuck where they're not actually sharing stuff, so everyone has to come to them, but then they can't move on to the next bit. So for me, I kind of see it really differently. I want everyone around me to grow, and so whatever I learn, I share, and then like they can also point out, you can do this a better way, like this. Like, okay, then I grow as well. It's the same thing like with going to conferences and stuff. I like to always share stuff. And then, people always also tell me like, when things can be done better. And then I take that because it's a small world, right? And it doesn't harm when everyone knows how to do things. It's all good.
Yeah. And I think just generally in life, or especially in business specifically, it's just so hard to build trust. And being transparent is something that sort of comes for free. That I think it's very scary for some people because they feel they have something to lose if they share themselves, both the weaknesses and the strengths of whether themselves or the organizations. But actually, it's a superpower if you can lean into that to build that trust because, well, even the mere resemblance of you hiding some truth can shatter the relationship and can shatter the trust, whether it's a business partner or a customer, right?
Yeah, completely. We're like always very transparent with everything, like what we're doing. To even like when we said like cost proposal, okay, that's a bit more too much in detail, but we always break everything down to like actually this is how long we think things will take. These are the rates and that. And so, but it's important to be clear. And like I said, in terms of sharing, I'm presenting every time I go to Fuse, I present something. It doesn't matter what, because I think it's a great platform for sharing stuff. And I gain a lot from it. And, often I see same people coming to my sessions and they're quite like listening to some of what I'm sharing. But generally, you've got to try and be bold. You can't just try to show the little thing. You also have to sometimes show the big thing. This is what we're really trying to do. And then let others also take this forward. It doesn't mean that it's just our secret. It's just we're the only ones who can do it. And sometimes some of the things that we've started like years ago, I've seen then further on than other people have taken on and then brought it to life, which is fair enough. This is business. But I don't know. I like to always share things. I feel much more, this is what we're doing. And if people want to join us and like help us to, or, partner with us on some certain things, I think it's good. But for me, the most frustrating thing is when I see that people are still doing the same stuff like 20, 30 years later. I think we have to be more efficient. There's always better ways. And sometimes I get frustrated when I see that actually it's not in their interest to be more efficient, but you need someone to want to be more efficient. So that's important. And so sometimes it's like, come on.
And I mean, we're sort of, I guess, 8 minutes into the podcast. We haven't actually spoken about anything specifically about statistical programming, but these soft skills I found fascinating because most programmers, especially those that have been, especially the junior ones, but I think even senior ones, it sometimes gets so transactional that people forget the importance of building trust relationships with your team, whether it's your direct team members or the statisticians or anyone else, stakeholders, to rather see them as partners and try to learn from them as you speak about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, you want to help, right? It doesn't matter who you're working with. You are a team, whether it's your team with your client or your team internally yourself. At the end, you're a team and with it some deliverable, whatever it is that you're trying to reach at the end. So you want to always challenge each other to make sure you get the best out of the team. And you want to, at the end, deliver quality on time. And that's kind of what matters. And for me, even as I say, when I remember years ago, before I even became a consultant, sometimes I'd be doing like 70-hour weeks. And my boss would be telling me, Shafi, you don't have to do this, But actually, there's like real challenge there. And we had to try to resolve it and so on. And, they had to actually, at the end, delay, so stop me from getting kicked out, because the server used to restart at midnight or something and then back up, so it'd kick everyone off. And so we had to say, can you please not kick me? And we had one other person helping you, can you please not kick us off at midnight every day and then weekends and stuff, because we're working. But it's, like I said, programming is kind of my passion. It's what I enjoy doing, and I'm doing it all the time. Always looking at problems. For me, it's about problem solving. It doesn't matter what we do. So recently with a client, they were spending weeks reviewing something and just checking what's been sent and so on by their other vendors. So then I just went to one side, came to, and then wrote a program and stuff, which could then check all these things. And so now when we get stuff, you could check in minutes, what before would take a long time to see, actually, have they set everything? Is everything correct and so on? Is you following the right logic? You've got your programs and validation programs and all these things. So I would just check in minutes and straight away give you a summary. But it's just like I said, I don't know. I don't like doing mundane things, right? Anything that's manual that can be automated, for me, is should be automated. And that's kind of what drives me, really.
So I think that's a perfect segue to my next question, which is that I know you're very into automation, and it's a hot topic, means different things to different people. How have you seen it evolve in the time that you've been a programmer?
To be honest, it's been really frustrating. There's a lot of frustration in my programming life, mainly because there's been a lot of opportunities to automate stuff. And so I push it, and whatever I can do, I try to do, and we get that done. Mainly because what I see is that actually it needs individuals. Especially in larger companies, you start to have committees and working groups, and then it inevitably takes years, and then someone moves on, and then it doesn't really go through. And actually, the initial vision is lost over time. And so what I find is that actually all the bits that I have to automate, and actually to be fair also with some of my clients where they had a few other individuals where they also automated some programs and so on, it made life much easier. But on the whole, there is very little automation. For example, we shouldn't be writing any safety and basic efficacy TLF programs. These are it still frustrates me that what I did in my placement year, we're talking 1993 here, right? This is 31 years ago. What I did then, we are still producing now. And I know everyone talks about, now we have C-Disk. Okay, before then every pharma had their own standards. So the C-Disk is just, to program, it's just another standard. But actually, we're still producing the same stuff now in the same way that we did then. And it's just depressing. I think, it's good that C-Disk is moving to results database and things like this. I think that would really help to drive things forward. We actually presented this about 7-8 years ago that actually, look, here's another way of producing your TLFs where you have a result database, and from there you can have what we call e-templates. And so basically it's just like Excel templates, and it just says, actually, I want this and us, this and this and us, and you have your table. But the analysis programs, they're like auto-generated, and they're easy to do because they're not, we spend most of our time actually making the output look nice, right? That's where most of the programming is spent when it comes to TLFs. And for me, that's frustrating. That should be like automated and, here's your results. You want it in this shell? Yep, there you go. And the program, if you're not spending that time to create the output, it's just a result, right? So it's just one procedure or whatever from your SAS or R, whatever you're doing. It's just so much easier. That you can automate again. So we did this, like I said, about 6, 7, I think we started about 8 years ago, and we finished that in the first version about 6 years ago. So, and I'm still, like I said, CDISC has come up with their results data sets now, so there's chance for more automation. But, we've had CDISC, SDTM, and ADAM for like God knows how long. And we're still not automating those. There's various versions of automation, but there's so much manual work going on in the background that it's actually just, I don't know, I find it a little bit frustrating.
So 2 questions. They're sort of related, but also not. One, given your experience in programming for such a long time, and your frustration, where do you get your optimism, your relentless optimism from? And second, what's a good and a bad application of automation that you have seen in your time?
Good automation, I think, like, for example, okay, it might be a little bit biased. I like what we have done, where you have metadata and you drive, and it auto-generates all your TLF programs, right? You can auto-generate about 80% of your TLFs, and it makes life much easier. And for clients, it's really good because they're always getting the same programs, right? Same looking structure. If you auto-generate a program, it doesn't matter whether you're producing or I'm producing it, it looks the same. It doesn't matter where we're sitting, it looks the same. So I think for me, that's quite good. And it's like with minimal input, so that from study to study, you can recreate most of the tables with minimal effort. A bad one is where companies have macros, but they're like giant macros. They're big black boxes. And so the users have to for every study, for every table, they have to change so many parameters. And it's very easy for them to miss one. Now, we had one client where they had these macros with over 100 parameters, right? And it's very easy for a user to, choose one parameter instead of a different parameter. And it's giving different answers. And because it's a giant macro, it's also then a black box. They have no idea. So they get numbers coming out and they're like, this doesn't look right, but it's from a validated macro, so I should accept it. But you look at it, it's like, it just looks wrong. It's like you wouldn't be happy to present those in front of, other people outside the company. So, so for me, that's where we need to make sure that automation should be modular, right? So it allows users to create stuff. Most of what the users normally create should be already built in as the default. So that way there's nothing to do. Because if you give someone, 10 different choice of milks for their coffee, then they'll need time to think which one they want, right? You say, here's coffee with your milk, right? That's it. That's what you get. Simple thing like pizza. In this country, in the UK, you order pizza with mushroom, right? You get mushroom pizza. You go to Germany, there is no pizza with mushroom. You don't see champignon and thing. It's which type of mushroom do you want, right? And so then it's like, exactly what you're getting, but you need to know those types of mushrooms. Generally, most people in the UK, I don't want to generalize, but, a lot wouldn't be able to tell the difference between too many mushroom names. But in Germany, it's quite common. Everyone knows. So I think there's ways, there's good ways that make sure people can do stuff quickly, and it should help. Sometimes people that use automation to showcase their skills, right? And I'm always telling developers and so on, it's not about your skill, it's how easy can you make it for the user, right? If the end user from study to study don't have to do anything, default takes care of it all, that's the best case. The fact that you've got a button which then does some flashy thing, that's not for them. It's like that you can, share with your other developers to show how good a programmer you are. But automation should always be about saving time. It should be about efficiency. It should be about quality. That actually they can trust the numbers that are coming out. They can trust the layout is going to be the same. They can trust that actually what's produced is what was required. And that helps companies. Like, for example, Big Pharma, they have many CROs. And even if they have 2 CROs, those are like giant CROs with like hundreds of teams. And like no 2 teams are the same, just like no 2 teams internally in a pharma company are the same, right? So how can you make sure that you develop macro which then all these people can use and give you always the same consistent result without having to think? For me, that's what automation is about. It's making life easy for all the hundreds of users, regardless of where they're from, where they're sitting, and they don't need to know the history. They just need to know if they select this, it'll give them that table, and it'll give them that table every time. And the program is easy that you can send them to FDA and they can understand it. So, a bit like what you guys are doing at Verizion, like with your traceability tool, right? You get all the logs, you can see everything, how it's tracing backwards, forwards. So automation should be about this, that actually you click on something, it does a nice, simple task very well. And it does tasks that needs to be done, that we need to know. For example, we often get questions, can we change this derivation, please? And this happens always at last minute, right? What does this impact? So if we had something like, for example, your tool, then your tool will say, actually, you can see exactly where it came from. And actually, it will impact these 20 outputs, and we need to rerun those and these things. Makes much more sense. With our one, what it does is actually, that's where it comes from. You need to run this, and it tells you actually, okay, you need to run these programs afterwards because they're impacted by it. So these are like, for me, good automations, right? It tells people, it helps people without having to do manual stuff. Because otherwise, you spend ages trying to figure out, if I change this variable, let's have a look, it affects these tables, that will be these programs, that will be these outputs. But here you can get this really quickly. So hopefully that, we need more people to embrace automation and not think of it as a shiny new ball, because there's always another new shiny new ball that everyone's going after. But think of stuff that makes difference to the people now, right? And then see how it can be used, like add more value in the future.
And your optimism, is that where it comes from?
That's where it comes from. That actually it will make life easier. Like, at some point someone must get it.
At some point, yeah.
Because like I said, it's frustrating, right? But at some point someone must get it, that actually, look. But I see, like I say, individuals doing it. And that's what, so I know that there are people trying out things, but it's just, especially in the pharma, we need slimmer, pilots where they're very, easy to actually, okay, some of these are, for a pharma company, is very cheap and so on, but let's just pilot this out. Let's try it on 1-2 things, see how it works. And then if it works, then it actually saves them a lot of money, a lot of resources. And yeah, so I've worked with some great managers where they took these things, they took these risks and said, actually, okay, let's try it out. And then, they have very little to lose and everything to gain. And we did, for example, risk-based monitoring for a client. We developed a tool and it saved them huge amounts, besides like the money and so on. But actually, it made the whole process much better. they could really clearly see what the data was like and so on. So for me, I think where I'm optimistic is that the younger people coming up, they are more willing to try things. So I think the newer managers, sometimes the older managers were much more risk averse, right? They were, oh, I don't know. But actually, in the bigger scope of things, these are very, very small risks because you're not actually messing about with the data, right? What you're doing is, so actually the risk is much smaller, but you can instantly see the benefits. So, yeah.
Now, we obviously have to talk about AI. Which, I mean, whether or not it's part of automation, let's put that aside. Where do you see the lowest hanging fruit? What are the biggest impacts, lowest hanging fruit of projects, of pilots, as you refer to them, that one can try? And actually, how should, if you're a global head of biometrics at a large pharma, how should one be thinking about doing these pilots? Because there's so many different ways to both in terms of technologies, outsourcing, buying. What are your thoughts?
AI is really, it's a bit of a minefield because everyone has different understanding of what it is. You have like individual programmers who want to save time, use ChatGPT to create a program. But that actually doesn't save that much time because then you look at a new code, you're trying to figure out what was going on. And this happened also like 30 years ago, it produced output. So I thought it was fine. Right? AI will always give you an output. Is it correct? And that's often like the tricky part. I think for pharma, one of the part that actually is needed and is really time consuming is things like table of contents, right? Which output to produce, looking at your SAP, looking at your table shells. These are like, every company has a standard table shell, right? Especially big pharma, they have standard table shells. Yet, for every study, they spend weeks both developing it, getting the CRO who's working with them to produce it, double check it, review it, and then at the end, there's still always last minute changes as well. All right. And for me, I think this is like the biggest waste of time. And the table of contents that, companies have been producing these for years. They have a big stack of, these are the talks that I need for this kind of study with this endpoint when we're looking for this. It's very easy to train an AI to actually produce a talk. So when you say, instead of trying to go backwards, where you say, actually, what's this SAP trying to produce? Why not look at the trial, the overall trial? Okay, what are the key things? You put that in, and it gives you the talk. It's going to, in the first round, it's going to be 50%, right? But by the end, you should be looking at around 90%, 95% of your talk being ready. So that is like almost instantly producing the talk. You still need your statistician to review it and fill in the missing blanks. They might say, actually, we also need this, or we don't need this. And then once this is done, then AI already knows what for each of these output, what the shell should look like, right? Because you've produced these before. So it can then do the table shell document. Again, saving weeks and weeks and weeks from a trial. And what do you know? We have programs for all these tables, right? It can then auto-generate the table programs. So for me, this is the low-hanging fruit. Let's get this talk ready. Let's get this table, the table shells ready. If we can produce this is much more for statistics rather than programming. But actually, they work together. Because if you know you need this talk, then you already have these outputs, these programs, right? So the AI can auto-generate all those programs. It knows it needs these endpoints in Adam. So again, I think one pharma company so far is using AI to auto-generate some of the code for their endpoints, right? Well, everyone else can as well. So if again, you need these endpoints in your Adam. So what you can do is you can start to build your Adam. So again, what I see AI doing is doing 50 initially, in the first phase, 50% of the work, programming work. But over time, I see it doing about 80% of the programming work. But from the stat side, from the talk and from the table shells, I see that doing 95%. And if you think how much time that saves, it's a huge amount of saving.
So if I could quickly jump in. So how do you therefore see the role of the statistical programmer evolve?
Because I think the statistical programmer has to, there are so many analyses that we are asked to do, and we all say, no, we can't do it because we're busy, right? What are we busy with? We're busy with doing the same stuff that the person sitting next to me did yesterday, right? And the person next to him. And these days, we're in a like global environment. And actually, already before this happened, when sometimes the person next to me would ask me, I spent like, a week, I can't solve this. Can you help me? I'm looking at it, I have a program which does this, right? And that was already when I was sitting next to him. Nowadays, no one is sitting next to each other. Everyone is like all around the world. So one thing that we've done in our application is we have a search facility. So you could just type in whatever you're looking for, and it will find your program within your system which does it. But I think in the global world, I think this is what people have to do. They have to not try to recreate stuff. I think if we try to recreate stuff, and for programmers, if they can have all this stuff automated, right, then they can really spend more time on doing the more interesting stuff. There's, pharma companies don't want to keep on hiring more and more stats programmers, but they actually want to make better use of the programs they already have. And this is a way that actually, if the programmer is not spending their time doing your ADSL Adam data set, which is like your basic subject level data set, right? Or your demography table and stuff, they can spend their time doing more interesting stuff. I worked last year on really complex endpoint, and it took me like months to program it and so on. And it was really challenging, and it was really good. And then when I was checking against like what some of the others were doing, I was validating their work. We found lots of issues and stuff. But I could only do that because I had the time. If I was busy then doing just standard stuff, we couldn't do it. So it allows pharma companies to explore new endpoints. There are so many stuff that the actual clinicians want to try out. And we always say no, both the statistician and the programmer behind them say no, just because we don't have time. But actually, we do have time if we just automate all this stuff. So I think there's a lot of skill for the programmers to have. One thing that I notice is that sometimes people think, actually, if they can just find another program, it does it, then it's done. And this is really a bad way, because it's like most things. You need to learn the basics. You learn the basics by doing. So you need to learn how to program. You need to learn all these things. And this you do by doing, right? Not just by reviewing someone else's program, because it always looks easy. How many times have you watched like a sport? I don't know. I like watching snooker, right? How many times do you think, oh yeah, you need to go for that shot in that corner with a bit of backspin, come move the wide for the next corner. It's easy to say, and they do it. That's what I told you should do. But you don't realize it takes so much skill to do that, right? This person has been practicing 8 hours a day, every day, to get to that so that he can do that shot that you want him to do. And it's the same thing with programming. You don't just know nothing, and without actually doing it yourself, you can't get there. So although you automate stuff, you learn to do all the basic programming as well, because otherwise you're never going to understand the more complicated stuff.
And I think that's such an important conversation to have, which we're not having enough. I mean, you go to the Fuse conferences. We had our event recently where you spoke at, and most of the focus is so much on the standards. And I'm not sure if you would disagree, but there's almost a dogmatic belief that everything can be automated away as long as we have some standard for it, where actually I think the conversation should evolve a lot more into what's the role of the statistical programmer given the new technology that exists. It's just like it's just like in learning how to use a computer for the first time. Now we're not coding, programming, and punch cards. Now we're actually writing ones and zeros in a computer in a higher level language, and that's a that's a much different conversation, a much more abstract that goes
Yeah.
beyond. And but the problem there is that it does go against a lot of the established, I guess, teams that have been set up, people that have been in high positions because they have built big macro libraries, and so there you get sort of a typical innovator's dilemma that you have to, I guess, I don't want to be controversial here, but go against the grain a little bit and tear some things down before you can rebuild it.
No. I actually think slightly differently. I think everything should be complementary, right? Like you were saying initially about my frustrations, right? We're producing PDF reports, which is nothing more than a glorified piece of paper that we used to produce like 30 years ago. So we need to think bigger, right? And where we're struggling at the moment is that, and actually you need to have the young people coming in, and they don't need to think of the basics because that's already taken care of, right? They're then thinking, okay, what are the challenges? What's the next step? Results. You have like, I think I usually mention this, which is like you see scientists in adverts and so on walking through molecules and stuff. Why are we still looking at 2D graphs and things like this? Why are we not looking at virtual reality, looking at like charts where you can just click on what you want and you can see everything, what the source was, and you can easily trace any kind of issues, things like this. I think, for example, R is a good one. I've been hearing R is going to take over for the last 20 years. And you see it coming and slowly and as more. But what I think is, again, people try to replace SAS with R. And I think, no, they have different things. It might over time replace, but not necessarily. Don't try to. It's not like all one or the other. So what I see is R has lots of stuff that it can do, which SAS struggles with. Right? So use R for those. And then look at whatever new things coming up, whoever can program, whether it's in SAS, R, Python. Again, for big data, Python is really big. And the guys who are graduating them with masters and are coming in now, they're using it to really analyze big financial data and so on in record times. While we're still struggling with a million lab records. Yeah. I used to have programs which would take 17 hours to run, right, to create my efficacy data set and so on. And I still see people taking hours, especially when it comes to the labs. They're like, oh, no, make sure you don't sort it. Otherwise, you're done for. But actually, the size of the data sets are really, really small compared to what financial things are doing. And whether it's looking at our technology, looking at our programmers, let's push our programmers. Let's put them on these courses. Because if you just always go to the same old places, you just learn the same old things, right? Why don't we look at actually what are the finance doing? How are they managing to do all these things better, faster, right? So I think for programmers, there's a lot of role. And I think for the managers, for the big bosses, they need to just take it, not, like I said, it's not one or the other. Let's evolve, right? Slowly. Same with AI, same with automation. It's not jump in, let's do everything. Let's try it out. How does it work? Because then you find all the challenges. Because in the bigger scheme of things, everything either looks good or it looks bad. There's you have the people who are saying, this is going to be really bad, or you have people who say, this is going to be really good. But the truth is always somewhere in the middle, right? And you have to kind of find for your own company what the individual challenges are, whether it's IT, whether it's programming skills, whether you don't have the right kind of skill set in your team, you might need to get some. Bring in a consultant, fresh face, right? They look at things in a very different way. So what I do is when I'm working at a company, I always give my honest truth, right? Because I'm not after a promotion or anything like this. So, and often the permanent staff also tell me things like, can you raise this, please? Can you raise that, please? Because it's actually, they've been raising it, but it doesn't go anywhere. But when you raise it as a consultant, it sometimes has a little bit more status. And so it gets like, looked into. So I think, again, having fresh faces, fresh technology, it can really help to make things better. But do things slowly. It's not, you have to jump in with both feet every time.
As a final question, Shafi, what's one thing that you've changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
It's actually one that I've changed my mind backwards and forwards a few times. It's remote working. Yeah, people say, well, since COVID, remote working, we can see how it's beneficial and so on. Long before COVID, I was working from home, right? And I had all these people who were programming for me from like, not necessarily from their home, but from like our office, like, in Bangladesh and wherever. And also when I was working with clients, and I was also working with their teams across, right? So, but you actually, it can work, right? You just need to make sure you trust the people, you hire the people you trust, and there's accountability. And when people do let you down, you let them know, look, this is what's going on. We really expect you to be working, like, But again, understanding that actually there are all these time zones and so on. And one of the reasons why people like to work from home is that they also have other duties which they might do. So, for example, I don't know, I might need to go to the doctor or something at 2:00 in the afternoon until 4. So I'll be off then. But then I'll like join in again later at like 9:00 and finish the stuff that I didn't do those 2 hours. Right. Yep. And so as long as there's give and take, this can work. I think people, there was a time when I thought, actually, this is not working. But it is important that everyone kind of plays their part. The senior people have to be there and junior people have to be there. So, but it can work.
Awesome, Shafi. Well, it was amazing to have you on the podcast. If anyone wants to learn more about some of the work that Shafi is doing, we have his talk that he gave at the last version community event is on YouTube. So check that out. And of course, Shafi goes around to quite a lot of the Fuse events. Maybe not the next Fuse EU Connect, but certainly do get in touch if you're interested. Shafi, any final parting message you want to give to our listeners before we say goodbye?
No, just look ahead. These things are always better, easier. There are always more easier ways to do it. If you're frustrated with anything that you're doing, find a way to automate it.
Shafi, thank you so much for having on the episode, and see you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Thomas. Bye.